Hi there, my name is Natalia. For those who don't know me, I'm one of the most fierce and feared activists for the emancipation of so-called Francophone Africa. So feared that France has declared me public enemy number one, had me expelled from its colony of Ivory Coast, and has banned me from entering French territory. Recently, in April 2023, under the leadership of the French Ministry of the Interior, Operation Wambushu was launched to expel Comorian nationals from Mayotte, one of the Comorian islands. This raises the question of how in the 21st century a foreign state can expel Africans from Africa. In this video, I will discuss how France, a rogue, toxic and harmful state that is only great when it rides on the shoulders of Africa and black people, has managed up till now to illegally occupy African territories in the Indian Ocean. The French first colonized Mayotte, whose local name is Maori, in 1841 and gradually extended their control over the other three main islands of the archipelago, Nzwani, Mwale, and Ngazija, which they renamed Anjouan, Moélie, and Grande Comore. Between 1886 and 1892, they turned it into a protectorate administered from Madagascar, another one of their colonies. And in 1946, the Comoros Islands became a French overseas territory. The local population resisted the dispossession of their land and resources by the French colonists. Thanks to pressure from nationalists and also from the international community, who was sick and tired to hear African leaders like the Cameroonian Ruben Umniobe and the Algerian Ahmed Ben Bella complain about the brutality of French colonization, an independence consultation was held on December 22, 1974, resulting in a massive and frank yes, with 95% of the vote cast in favor of independence. But guess what? France refused to accept the results and decided, in complete violation of international law, to keep the island of Mayotte under French rule, therefore amputating the new state called Republic of Comoros, created on July 6, 1975, of a quarter of its territory. The indivisibility of colonial territories is a concept of international law recognized by numerous United Nations resolutions which emerged during decolonization. It stipulates that colonies must be considered as indivisible entities, and that any attempt to divide or separate a colonial territory is contrary to the principles of self-determination and territorial integrity of states. France, like many Western countries, has a selective interpretation of international law and is willing to disregard it for its own benefits. This was demonstrated in its treatment of the Comoros. When a consultation takes place in France and the French president is elected with 58% of the vote, he governs all of France and not just the 58% of it. The same principle applies worldwide, including in the Comoros. But to maintain its hold on the Comoros, France organized an illegal referendum in Mayotte on February 8, 1976, in which the question asked was whether the Maori people wanted to remain part of the French Republic or gain independence within the framework of the Comoros. Interestingly, a similar situation occurred when, in 2014 and 2022, the people of Crimea, Donetsk, and Lugansk were given the opportunity to decide whether they wanted to join the Russian Federation or remain part of Ukraine. Overwhelmingly, they choose to become Russian subjects, with more than 96% voting yes in Crimea, 99% in Donetsk, and 98% in Lugansk. These results are comparable to those of the consultation in Mayotte in 1976. So, at a time when Emmanuel Macron is unabashedly accusing Africans of hypocrisy in the face of the situation in Ukraine, at a time when France is among those who loudly denounce the integration of the territories of Crimea and Donbass into Russia as an annexion, it is itself the author of repeated annexions and occupation, condemned by the international community, and which continue to this day. The nerve of that. Instead of keeping a low profile, France brandishes its overseas territories like a thief who arrogantly and openly claims the spoils of ancient plunder. If I ask you where France is, what answer will you give me? Obviously, that France is a country located in Europe next to Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Spain. Perhaps you will even tell me that it is bordered by the English Channel, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Atlantic Ocean. So how can this France, which is loudly complaining about immigration, which is causing it considerable discomfort, this France which feels threatened by the prospect of a great replacement by blacks, Arabs, and Muslims, this France which proudly claims its Christian culture and values, borders, a territory to protect in Europe in which it finances with its EU accomplices concentration camps in Libya to prevent migrants from crossing the Mediterranean and going to seek a little hope of a better life in the West. How can these France affirm that territories situated thousands of kilometers from Europe are theirs? People who are scared and jump in the air at the slightest Allahu Akbar, who criminalize polygamy and veiled women, who express deep contempt for everything related to Islam and ancestral African customs. Do not hesitate to claim and annex a Muslim African territory with a matrilineal tradition 8,000 kilometers from Paris. Come on, let's be a bit serious. France must be consistent, and if not, then it's up to us to help it. France's past actions show its effort to weaken newly independent states like Guinea, who opted for independence in 1958, and the Comoros. Paris orchestrated a cohort of destabilization, including sending mercenaries, led, among others, by the infamous Bob Denard, to perpetuate coup d'etat and assassination of heads of states and leaders in African countries such as Congo, Benin, Angola, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, the Comoros, etc. Ironically, the same people who complain about the Russian private military company Wagner are the ones who sent their militaries to destabilize African countries and still do so. I made a previous video on that topic that I'm linking here. Whilst it was busy to durably destabilize the Comoros, France maintained a tight grip on Mayotte, despite international condemnation and UN resolutions. France used its status as a permanent member with the right of veto to block a resolution of the Security Council on Mayotte in February 1976. It anchored its administrative control on the island through the illegal referendum of 1976, the departmentalization in 2009, and Article 73 of the 2003 French Constitution. France has a history of constitutionalizing its plundering to make it irreversible, as it did with cultural and religious artifacts stolen during colonization, and territories it continues to occupy despite independence claims, such as those by the peoples of New Caledonia, Polynesia, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Wallis and Futuna, Réunion, Madagascar. Despite Macron's claims to want to change France's relationship with the continent, Operation Wambushu is yet another display of French arrogance and occupation in Africa. Operation Wambushu is its latest neo-colonial maneuver. Under this operation, France forcibly removes Comorians who are living in Mayotte but are declared illegal migrants and send them to other islands in the Comoros archipelago. This move is reminiscent of France's history of throwing black people into boats to forcibly bring them to places they didn't choose, which dates back to the time of slavery. Yet, France, with its rogue, colonial, and deeply racist state, is the only illegitimate entity in Mayotte, and it is time to confine it to its hexagonal form in Europe. While the West, the Orientals, the Oceanians, the South Americans may turn a blind eye to French actions, it is intolerable unacceptable and condemnable for Africans to do so. France not only illegally occupies a part of the Comoros, but also a part of Madagascar, the Epirsus Island. Let's start with Assali Assoumani, who is the president of the Comoros through fraudulent elections and coup d'etat, and who is also the current president of the African Union. Instead of demanding the retrocession of Mayotte, Assoumani grovels before Emmanuel Macron and his government in Paris, and without dignity begs for the lifting of visas. A traitor to the interests of its country and people, he takes pleasure to remain in the monetary jail of the Comorian franc, which is the twin of the CFA franc, instead of renegotiating all the iniquitous agreements signed and demanding every day at every international forum the implementation of the UN resolutions relating to the unconditional retrocession of Mayotte to Comoros. It is time that African leaders show solidarity and take action against France's illegal occupation of African territories. Despite the United Nations call to member states to intervene with France to renounce its detachment of Mayotte from the Comoros or the Epirsus Island from Madagascar, these provisions have not been enforced for the past 48 years. It is unacceptable that African presidents focus on international issues like Ukraine or Palestine, while territorial occupations and foreign aggressions occur on the continent. African leaders need to act against France, as they did during the apartheid era in South Africa. French companies should not be allowed to operate in Africa while sister countries are still under French occupation. The European Union unites to sanction Russia for its action in Ukraine or to intervene in Mali and Central African Republic. But where are the African Union sanctions against France for its actions in the Comoros and Madagascar? African leaders need to wake up, regain their dignity and work together to recover Mayotte and the Epirsus Islands. No square centimeter of African territory is transferable or negotiable. Before I conclude by addressing the Maori people, please subscribe, give a thumbs up, share the video link and consider contributing to my fundraisers, links below, if you would like to support my work and enable me to produce more educational content like this. Finally, let me speak directly to the Maori people who may be suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. Can't you see that you're being used as a pawn? For decades, you have wanted to be French, but France sees you as inferior and treats you like sixth-class citizens. If they could, they would toss you off boats and onto the bottom of the sea or on another island, just like they did to your ancestors. France loves Mayotte for its strategic location and exclusive economic zone, allowing them to monopolize marine resources. However, they do not care about you, the people. Your standard of living in Mayotte is 7 times lower than that of mainland France, with 77% of the population living below the national poverty line. You are the least educated and the most unemployed, trailing behind Martinique, Guadeloupe and Réunion. These are not my words, but the figures of your own National Statistic Institute, INSEE. Get out. My Comorian brothers and sisters of Nzwane, Maori, Ngazija and Mwale, you must reject the division and the corrupt political parties and ruling classes that only serve the interest of the metropolis or their own pockets, and work towards your emancipation. Build a self-sufficient, sovereign society based on land reform, agricultural development, and the exploitation of marine resources. The world is changing and you cannot miss the opportunities offered. Unite and channel your common frustrations and your aspiration for a better life. Take power and make the Comoros a reunited, stable, prosperous country that respects its citizens